Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Chase with Jace. And I'm joined by Glen West of 247. Glenn does an excellent job of covering the LSU beat, not only for LSU football but all the other LSU sports as well. Glenn does a great job, and we're thrilled to have him join the show. Glenn, what's been going on?
Yeah, man, I've just been super pumped for the start of this season. LSU's given us three kind of different but not different games. It's been heart pounding kind of stuff. I've had to change my game stories pretty constantly over the first couple weeks. So hopefully we can get a game here where LSU comes out and dominates from start to finish and makes it very boring for us writers. But I'm sure it's been fun and probably knocked a couple months off of everyone's lives that follows LSU football closely.
Yeah, you're right about that, Glenn. I mean, going back, kind of reverting back to some of the Les Miles days where you have to
For sure, for sure.
not great for the heart. I can tell you that. But yeah, Glenn, you mentioned it, and yeah, it was spot on there. Three different versions of LSU that we've seen through 3 weeks to really get I guess, a great read on this team. But I mean, there's been ups and downs from both sides of the football. But hey, they're here, 2-1, and even though you lose the opening game of the season to USC, you're able to find a way to go on the road and get a win against South Carolina. And now you're at a stretch right now that could help you get better and sets up to where it could be if you take, of course, taking care of business, having a big game against Ole Miss later down the road.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, you're sitting here at 2-1, and what have the conversations been? It's been about how LSU's been extremely inconsistent in all phases of the game. They haven't really played complementary football to this point. I know that's been something Brian Kelly has really, made a public message multiple times over the last couple weeks. But here you are, and you're sitting with all of your preseason goals still very much within grasp. I mean, if you go out there and you start to show that some of that improvement over the next couple of weeks, like you just mentioned before that Ole Miss game. You roll into that game 4-1. You take your best shot there, and look, what have we learned here about the first couple of weeks of the SEC? It is extremely hard to go on the road and beat even an average team. And I think LSU is a better than average team. We just saw Kentucky, give Georgia everything they had. So look, I think that LSU here, certainly lots of ways that they can improve and get better, which I'm sure we'll dive into here. But I think just from a holistic view and just kind of looking at it from a 10,000-foot view, everything's still in front of this team, and I think it's a team that has a lot of talent. The people want to pick apart some of the personnel on defense in particular. I won't have too much pushback on that, but I think this is a very talented offense. And I think it's a defense that has some playmakers, and I think we've seen that here over the first couple weeks.
Yeah, and you talk about how tough it is to win on the road, and you saw Georgia struggle, and obviously that's a perfect segue to talking about that South Carolina game.
Yeah.
And if you're LSU on the road, you cannot start a game any worse than what they did with College Game Day, the atmosphere over there. You with blinking an eye, you pretty much see yourself down in a 17-0 hole. But I don't know what's more concerned because there was a stat being thrown out that during Brian Kelly's time at LSU that they've started games off slow. I mean, down double digits, 17 points. We've seen this a lot from this LSU team, but I don't know if it's more concerning that they're always down early or if it's more impressive that they actually do pretty well in these type of situations and coming back and overcoming some of these early deficits.
Yeah, I think in specific to this team, I would definitely lean more towards a concern that you're getting down big early in these games. I think even last year or even 2 years ago, I think you always had that potential in LSU's offense that you didn't feel like they were ever out of a game. I mean, I think the Tennessee game is the one where I think
Mhm.
you were just pretty much railroaded from start to finish in 2022. But there were a lot of games where LSU got down early, were able to make a little bit of a comeback, and maybe not win in the end. But I think that this is a team that you just can't afford to get down 17-0 to Ole Miss or to Alabama or on the road at A&M here in a couple weeks. Like, this is a team that very much I think needs to be in close games and be able to I guess, just overcome some maybe a little bit of an early deficit, but not one where you're really scratching and clawing to get your way
Mhm.
back into it. I think that maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, and you were able to do it for one game against South Carolina, but so many things broke your way in that South Carolina game that you can't really rely on going forward. I mean, to have not one but two pick sixes called back in your favor. You had so many opportunities in the red zone, a couple of stuffs there. I mean, that one right out of the gates of the third quarter, you got to
Mhm.
score a touchdown there at first and goal
Mhm.
from the two. I mean, that's the kind of drive there that ends and you don't get any points that costs you games and doesn't let you win games. So, look, there's lots of areas here where LSU I think needs to improve. They need to be in a position where they're not always playing from behind because I do agree
Mhm.
with you. That's a concerning thing here going forward, but I also think this is a team that has, every opportunity here going forward to kind of learn a little bit more about itself over the next couple weeks and really head into this Ole Miss game with that bye week in pretty good shape health wise, and should be a really fun one in a couple weeks. But certainly got to get through the next couple.
Yeah, but the good thing for LSU is a lot of mistakes, but it's always better to be going back in the film room, looking at these mistakes, coming off a win, and somehow LSU was able to do that. As good as South Carolina played, but LSU was able to get back in this game. They were down 17-0. A big question mark coming from the Nichols game was what's going to be the answer in the running game, who's going to step up in the running game, and it turned out to be kind of reminiscent. I just actually posted an article about this, Glenn, just now before going on, but kind of reminiscent of when Jeremy Hill had his like breakout freshman game against South Carolina. Caden Durham, a freshman himself, was able to step up, rush for 2 touchdowns, close to 100 yards, break a lot of tackles, and show a lot of promise in an area that was a concern for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it was the single biggest takeaway you could have if you were an LSU fan coming out of that game was Caden Durham coming out and running for 98 yards, had multiple explosive runs. I mean, I think he had a 26-yard touchdown, he had a 20-yard run, he had a 9-yard touchdown, he had another 15-yard run. When you're able to stack more and more of those together throughout the course of a game, defenses have to pay attention to them. And I think what you saw in the third kind of late fourth quarter there as LSU made its charge back into taking a lead, they respected the run game when Caden Durham was in there, and it really opened up the playbook
Mhm.
for LSU. I mean, the one play I go back to in this game that I thought really mirrored that kind of line of thinking was the touchdown to Mason Taylor. And
Mhm.
Caden Durham wasn't even on the field there. I mean, LSU got inside the 5. They were, I think, around the 2 or 3 yard line. Um, they did their thing where they're shifting their offensive linemen. They're pulling a lot of those guys right, but they bring Mason Taylor back left underneath. And when they snap the ball, all 2 or 3 of the linebackers' eyes were right on Josh Williams because they were thinking this is going to be a run and we're going to try. LSU's going to try to score up the right hand side in a run, and nobody picked up Mason Taylor, kind of coming underneath that route, and Nussmeier notices it. It's an easy touchdown. LSU takes the lead right there, and I think those are the kinds of plays here when LSU gets into the red zone, when the field shortens, when Brian Kelly talks about the blue zone, which is inside the 5 yard line. I'm glad somebody brought that up to him yesterday because I was
Yeah.
curious a little bit about kind of what he means by blue zone, but so any play that's inside the 5 yard line, having a running game that you have to respect as a defense is just so valuable for an offense, and especially an offense when you don't have a running quarterback like Garrett Nussmeier. So like there's a lot of things here that I think LSU can continue to build on in the run game. I do think that Caden Durham's role will continue to expand,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean that they're going to go away from Josh Williams and Caleb
Right.
Jackson. I think that both of those guys are still going to be pretty heavily involved in this offense moving forward as well.
Yeah, you pretty much answered my next question for you, Glenn. What was if this was going to be more of a situation that Caden Durham was like the hot hand, and then it was his game, or if this was going to be him moving forward, being RB1.
Right.
But I agree with you.
Brian Kelly told us yesterday, like, we're not there yet with him. I mean, like, we think he's great. We think he's got a really bright future ahead, but this is this is very much still a by committee backfield, and I think it should be. Look, I think Caleb Jackson had a nice 19-yard run right out of the gates in the third quarter, reminiscent of what we saw last year. Get him on the perimeter, get him in open space against a safety or a defensive back, and he's going to either make a miss or he's going to plow right through them. And I think there's a lot of opportunities there, and I have been a little bit surprised. I think if we want to get into this from a little bit of a perspective of just how heavily LSU's leaned on the inside zone run. Like I think that
Mhm.
everything we'd heard, everything we'd seen in spring practice and in fall camp, they were really trying to get these backs on the perimeter, and they just have not been able to do that very consistently these first 3 weeks. And I think what you saw here, LSU was able to hit that B gap in between the left tackle and the guard on the left-hand side, get those guys out on the perimeter and let Durham, let Jackson, let those guys make a couple guys miss and get downfield for some big chunk yards. So maybe it's a sign of things to come. There were still some inconsistencies in the run game. They still got stuffed a lot at the line of scrimmage, but I think the explosive plays that you did see are areas where LSU can now go back and look at the film and try to continue to exploit offenses or opposing defenses in that way.
Yeah, we're joined on the Chase with Jace with Glen West. You can follow him on X at Glen West 21. Follow all his great content he puts up for LSU for 247. Glenn, as well. I mean, we're talking about Garrett Nussmeier a little bit. No, I don't think I've ever seen a game where I've seen two pick sixes like that just get nullified.
Yeah.
I know he got pretty lucky with those. I know Garrett did a great job of leading the go ahead game winning touchdown drive, showed a lot of poise down the stretch, but it's still a little bit of that kind of gunslinger mentality you've seen with Garrett and some decisions and stuff. But
Yeah.
what do you make of Garrett through 3 weeks?
Yeah, look, I think he's been real solid. I mean, I think there's always going to be areas where you can nitpick a quarterback, and Kelly talked about that a little bit yesterday. But I do think that he's been more good than bad,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say a lot more good than bad. I think there's a very legitimate argument to be made that LSU isn't 2-1 right now without Garrett Nussmeier's play at quarterback. I think he's done a phenomenal job of being able to lead some late charges, be kind of the beating heart of the offense, because I mean they have not had really any kind of help with him in terms of the run game. They've really leaned on him those first couple weeks, and then they were finally able to get the run game going a little bit here in week 3. But I've just been super impressed. I mean, there were a couple throws, and our guy who also is on the beat, Matthew Bruni, who covers for On Three, he put out a couple of throws yesterday, and I'm not sure if folks saw it, but there was one throw over the middle and like in between like 3 defenders of South Carolina that Nussmeier was able to fit in beautifully to Aaron Anderson. There was that downfield 46-yarder to Aaron Anderson. I mean, those are throws, those are NFL type throws there. I mean, like there's absolutely that kind of talent in Nussmeier. You just got to be able to, when you get into those red zone opportunities in particular, just be a little more careful with your decisions there, because that one that was thrown in the end zone, it was in double or triple coverage, and
Yeah.
there really was nothing there. And it just was not a smart decision, and lucky that it was called back and that it was just an interception and not a touchdown going the other way. But look, I think he's completed 70% of his passes. He's up towards the top in the country in touchdown passes. He's, I think, in the top 15 or 20 in terms of passing yards, completion percentage. All that stuff has been great for him. And he's only in his first 3 or 4 starts. I mean, that's what we have to remember here, is that this is a guy that is really getting his first opportunity. And look, Joe Burrow was not Joe Burrow in year 1 of his tenure. Jaden Daniels was certainly not the Heisman Trophy Jaden Daniels in his first year at LSU. And I think it just takes time for these guys to really learn the game speed and just kind of everything that they're kind of picking up throughout the course of these games. And I think Nuss is going to only get better from here. I think he's got a very high ceiling as this season moves along. And if they're able to complement the run game a little bit more like they were against South Carolina, I think this offense could really take off and be pretty explosive down the stretch.
No, I agree with you, and like you said, I mean, he's right now ahead of what Burrow and Daniels were doing at this point of their first years, and
Yeah, you see
Brian
the
Kelly.
talent. The talent
Yeah,
is easy
right.
to see. It's just getting those game reps and making sure that he's developing and learning from his mistakes throughout the course of the season. He's not going to be perfect this year, but there's a lot of good that I think you can take from his start, and I think fans should be pretty excited about what's to come here. I think he's got a very bright future.
Yeah, and really, he Brian Kelly said he's on pace for 45 touchdowns, like
Yeah.
4,500 yards. Like he's on pace for that type of year. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Preseason, I was like around 3,800 and 27 touchdowns, maybe three or
Right.
four, maybe five or six interceptions. I mean, he's on pace to be shattering those kinds of numbers. So, like,
Mhm.
I think he's poised for a big year. They just got to be able to balance it out a little bit more consistently with the run game against some of these higher powered teams that they're going to be facing down the stretch.
And Nussmeier has been doing a great job. I think I even asked Coach Kelly about it, but spreading the football to different receivers, right?
Yeah,
Not just Aaron Lacy. Aaron Anderson's having a great second year here at LSU,
huge,
and CJ
huge.
Daniels, Mason Taylor. There's a whole lot of options you can throw the football to.
Yeah, look, I think Aaron Anderson's been an extremely bright story here in the first
Yep.
couple weeks. I mean, he really does look like he's taken that next step as a player. There's so many creative ways that LSU can utilize him in the passing offense, and I figured he'd be more of like that screen kind of receiver,
Mhm.
the short yardage receiver. You get the ball too quickly and let him go, get some yards after the catch. LSU's been throwing it to him in the middle of the field, 19,
Mhm.
20 yards downfield. I mean, we just talked about the two throws that Nussmeier had in this past South Carolina game. One was right over the middle in between three defenders, and the other one was a deep shot down the field, which was really one of their first deep shots that they've taken all season long. And so I will be interested to see once Chris Hilton gets healthy and back in the mix, kind of how he factors into this offense, because I do think that he and Nussmeier showed a pretty uh, lethal chemistry throughout the entire offseason and back into that bowl game where they got a chance to really kind of build a little bit more on field chemistry. But I really like what LSU's done from a receiving perspective. I mean, some of the offseason talk was, all right, does LSU have quite the guys that they've had in the past? And I think most people, or at least most people in the media that watched, they were like, look, LSU is going to be fine at receiver. You don't have to worry about receiver, and that's at least proven us right. They've been really really good. You mentioned what Kyron Lacy's done. He's been fantastic, taking that next step as the leader in that room. CJ Daniels is a really solid veteran that I think can still has a lot of untapped potential in this offense. And Mason Taylor at the tight end position, I think, has given you some really consistent play. So yeah, I'm very bullish on this group. I'd love to see them get Xavier Thomas more
Mhm.
involved. I mean, I think when he's had the ball in his hands, he's made some things happen, and they didn't really get him off in that game against South Carolina like I thought they might have. So maybe he's somebody that is a little bit of an X factor that maybe has fallen a little bit underneath after the first kind of couple games there. I think he's a guy that LSU needs to get going a little bit more.
What is encouraging about Xavier Thomas is what he's been doing on special teams as
Oh
returning
yeah,
punt.
yeah,
It's been night
night,
and day.
night and day. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're good, Glenn. I'm with you on there. I mean, the night and day, and I guess it's refreshing because you're used to seeing LSU having those playmakers that can return it, not only catch the punt consistently, feel the punt consistently, but have that uh, ability to take it for 6 points any given play.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think Xavion is. I mean, there was a punt against Nichols last weekend that I brought up a couple times when people have asked me about it, but it kind of bounced in front of a couple of Nichols, returners on the punt return, and it looked like it was going to be one of those that kind of, maybe they catch and kind of field. Thomas came out of nowhere and picked it up and started running with it, and I was like, if that had happened any other previous 2 years, it probably would have been muffed and
Mhm.
going back the other way for 6 points. I mean, like they just did not have a lot of faith in their return game other than go out there, field the punt, wave your hand in the air, just don't do anything stupid kind of thing. And I think Xavier Thomas is completely reversed that kind of line of thinking. I think he's an absolute weapon there that can help field position change and a lot of different things. I think he's somebody that is an athlete that LSU should utilize, and I think they will going forward more than just in special teams.
Yeah, I mean, very refreshing, and I always have to say, punt return that has to be the hardest position in
I wouldn't wanna
football.
do it.
I
I
wouldn't
wouldn't
want.
wanna do it. You know, it's a
No.
it's a it's one of those things where you might have 1 or 2 good plays throughout the course of a season, maybe 3 or 4 if you're really, really good. But the opportunity there to either take a big hit or fumble a ball, those things get remembered a lot more than sometimes, returning it, 20, 30 yards, or on the rare occasion you get a touchdown. I wouldn't want to be a punt returner. No, that would not be something I'd want to do.
Yeah, definitely don't sign me up for that. And Xavion actually took a big hit and just against South Carolina, just bounced
Yeah.
off it and
Yeah.
was able to
Yeah.
return it. So shows you what kind of playmaker he is at that position. Offensive line's definitely been a big target. I mean, big topic of discussion because coming into the season, a lot of high expectations. A lot of media people at LSU or covering LSU were saying that this offensive line is the best position group on the team. Talking about all the position groups on LSU's football team, and a lot of people were saying that they've been maybe a little underachieving a little bit, but I mean they've been great in pass protection for most of the time. With Nussmeier, I think he's only been sacked maybe one time so
Yeah.
far this point in the season. So, but I know run blocking's been definitely been in this discussion. How do you evaluate this offensive line and how they've been playing?
Yeah, I've been a little underwhelmed, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. I mean, I was one of those guys in the local media here that was pumping their praises all off season, and I think for the most part, we thought that they would be a really good pass protecting offense, and they've shown that. I mean, they're legit in that respect, and that's really good when you don't have a particularly mobile quarterback like us. I think that they've done a nice job of keeping him upright for the most part. South Carolina did get some pressures on
Mhm.
him this last weekend. I think that was the first time we've seen him kind of fluster a little bit at times. But he was able to kind of settle in, I think, as the game went on. But from a penalty perspective, from a run blocking perspective, there's a lot of room for improvement there as LSU goes throughout the rest of their season. I've been really, I'm trying to find another word for displeased, but just
Yeah.
surprised maybe a little bit that these false starts have been such an issue in the first couple weeks. I mean, they've had a couple holding calls, a couple of delay of game calls. I mean, there's just been a little bit of unorganization, I think, up front that I didn't really expect this season with that group because it's such a veteran group and those guys have performed so well in the past. And even in the run game, I mean, last year we saw Logan Diggs have a stretch
Mhm.
there in the middle of his season where he was really consistent for LSU at the running back spot. So I'm not saying that they can't get back there. It's going to take a little bit of work, and certainly those guys are working on it right now. I mean, we've had a chance to speak with Emory Jones and Will Campbell and player interviews and things of that nature, and they're working on it. I think they want to get this thing right, but there's certainly a lot of work to be done in terms of opening up those holes consistently. And I thought, South Carolina, when they did have some success against the Gamecocks, that was something where um, they were able to kind of utilize the left-hand side of that offensive line. Campbell and Dellinger,
Mhm.
Mason Taylor in particular, I thought all had really nice blocks on some of those big explosive runs. And so they can do that a little bit more consistently. I think this group, and a lot of the questions or concerns that have cropped up with this group will go away pretty quickly.
Yeah, and we've seen some big runs. I feel like some of the biggest runs they've really had, especially against the USC in the USC game, the first game of the year, was like the guards, tackles pulling out,
Yeah.
and I thought that was like something they're going to incorporate a little bit more in the running game, but we haven't really seen that as much yet.
Yeah, it's been a creative way that they did that in the South Carolina game. They kind of
Mhm.
changed things up because what you saw was there was movement to the right side, like they would
Mhm.
move the defensive line to the right side while at the same time, pulling Frazier or pulling
Mhm.
Jones on one particular run that I'm thinking of to the left side and creating an opportunity for an extra kind of run fit there for these running backs to open up a hole for them on the left hand side. So like I think that they're trying to figure out different ways to kind of get this run game off the ground, and credit to Durham for seeing the holes and hitting the holes hard. But they were able to open up a couple there, and it took an entire group effort on the offensive line to get that done. So That's been something that's been pretty consistent from Emery that we've heard from Will Campbell. Like we just all have to be working as one in that respect to really open up this run game and do it the way that we know we can. So I'll be very interested to see how it looks over the next couple weeks because I do think that there are going to be a lot of opportunities here for that run game to kind of really get off the ground and get rolling here before they get into that Ole Miss game.
And Glenn, the last point I want to make about the offense before we talk about the defense is, and of course you mentioned at the very beginning, it's been the problems in the red zone. I feel like you're more comfortable with it. It's crazy to say, but I feel like you're more comfortable with this team. This team had a first and goal at the 20 of scoring touchdown, then you had a first and goal at maybe the 1 or 2 yard line. What do you think has just been the problem in that area that's been so
Yeah.
up and down for this team?
Yeah, they have no problem moving it in between the 20s. It's really when they get into that 20, 15, 10, 5 yard line that it's been really inconsistent. And I'm right there with you. I think probably the one thing that sticks out to me is I know people want to get on the play calling and all that stuff, but really I think it comes down to just execution. I think when they get down there, when the field tightens, defenses are able to kind of maybe do a little bit more with what they're with what they want with their scheme. I think they notice some things that maybe LSU's offense is showing pre-snap that maybe is not beneficial to the Tigers on offense. So just not being as predictable, I think, is going to be an extremely important thing for them. And Brian Kelly's talked about that predictability when the field shortens, being something they're constantly working on, and making sure you have the right personnel in there as well. I mean, they I think they should lean more into the tight ends when they get down in the red zone. I mean, they have some big guys. I mean,
Yeah.
Pimpton and Trades Green and Mason Taylor, those are huge guys that I think could really, really help you. And they really haven't utilized Pimpton and Green in particular
Yeah.
since that first game against USC. So I'll be very curious to see if maybe those guys get a couple more opportunities here going forward. But look, I think when the field tightens, also it comes down to physicality and it comes down to wanting it more kind of deal, especially when you get inside the 5. So I think it's a combination of a couple of different things, probably execution, probably a little bit of play calling, and probably a little bit of just wanting it more and being more physical down there than the opposition. But there's certainly a lot of room to improve there in the red zone.
Yeah, and maybe this is like the only because I mean LSU's pretty deep at the time and position. You talk about all the weapons and Taylor and Pimpton and Green, but maybe this is part of where you miss maybe like Matt Markway or something like that the most as a run blocker. I know they've been trying to experiment with Bartolon as like an
Yeah.
extra kind of tight end. I think we've seen Gabe Relaford even come in as like a fullback. So it's gonna be interesting to see how they kind of manage that throughout the year and how they can improve in that red, white, and blue area,
Yeah.
like Coach Brian
I mean,
Kelly says.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the stats in the red zone, like LSU went 5 of 7, it says in red zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it just doesn't feel like they went 5 of
Mhm.
7. It feels
Right.
like they have to work so hard when they get inside the red zone for those points. And on the couple of occasions where you don't get the points, those are the ones that are magnified more than when you do score. But look, on that 2 yard touchdown run for Josh Williams, offensive line just shoved South Carolina back into
Mhm.
the end zone, and he had really just a runway to kind of just run through and not really be touched. And
Right.
that 2 yard touchdown to Mason Taylor was just a beautiful play design. So like there's a couple things there. I mean, those two plays alone, physicality and creativity and not being predictable in their play calling, those are two things right there that help you score 2 touchdowns. So if you're able to kind of hone in on a couple of those things and be a little bit more consistent in those areas when you get into the red zone. I also would like to see that if LSU gets into some fourth and short situations, just kick the field goal, just go get points. Like I mean, just 3 points is okay every once in a
Yeah.
while. So we'll see there. I know Brian Kelly likes to be aggressive in those situations, especially early in games. But I think a lot of folks would like to see LSU see
Mhm.
Ramos on the field a little bit more in those situations.
Yeah, progress, Glenn. I know he deferred. He wanted to toss and deferred.
Yeah. How
So
about that?
that yeah,
How
how
about
about
that?
that? I was a little surprised by that too.
And
So
look, I mean, you didn't score in that third quarter, that first possession of the third
mhm,
quarter, but you set the tone. I mean, like you went down there, you marched right down the field, you got inside the 5 yard line, and look, you got stuffed on 3, 4 plays in a row where you really should have scored there. But that, I mean, I love having that extra possession in the second half. So we'll see if LSU agrees and continues to do that.
as crazy as that game was, LSU had a chance to even win that game by more if you think about it, with the
Yeah.
2 empty red zone possessions and have a chance to win by more than that, as crazy as that game was. Defensively, I mean, I've had conversations with a lot of different beat writers and a lot of different radio hosts. I mean, I talked to Wilson about this and Matt about this, but they've had different opinions. I'm with Wilson that going into the season that this was going to be a team that was going to be a defense that was going to make a lot of plays and be aggressive and make a lot of plays, but also at the same time give up a lot of plays too. And I feel like that's what we've seen through the course of a couple of games, especially giving up the big plays in the running game.
Yeah, look, I mean, it was not a great game in terms of the linebackers and fitting the run on those big long runs that they allowed for Sellers and Sanders to get off on. So those things kind of get highlighted when you have a game like that that's as close as it was, and they came in pretty untimely situations as well.
Mhm.
You know, right when LSU was trying to get back into the game, you give up those big long runs on the very next possession. So those are timely mistakes there. But I do think that as a whole, this team, this defense has shown you like they're not last year's defense in terms of the
Mhm.
passive nature of how they play. They're a group that's going to be able to make some plays. They're going to have some opportunities to make plays in every game, and it's just about going out and doing it. I think Savion Jones has been really solid for them so far. Thought he was the MVP of that first game against USC for
Yeah.
LSU. Had a couple really nice moments against South Carolina. Braden Swinson obviously had the big game against South Carolina. And I don't think really, the Jacoby and Guillory injury is horrible on a lot of different
Yeah.
fronts for him and for the program. But I do think that LSU held up okay outside
Mhm.
of those, couple of runs there where South Carolina got into that second level and was able to bust it open for big plays. Um, it's really going to come down to the linebackers for me and
Yeah.
how they run fit and help back that unit up front because I do think that LSU they moved Perkins to that strong side
Mhm.
linebacker role. They've moved him kind of not being that inside guy that's going to be able to run fit every single time. They're going to bring him off the edge some. They're going to have him in the box a little bit, but also just a little bit outside the box, it looks like. So, how Whit Weeks and Greg Penn and when he gets healthy, West Weeks, utilize those plays and are able to help fit the run in that respect, I think is really going to help this defense be a little bit more consistent in getting off the field. I think they've done a pretty good job on third down. I mean, they've gotten off the field pretty consistently in that USC game. I think in UCLA's case, they were. Hold on, I'm trying to find the stat here. They were. UCLA was, or sorry, not UCLA. South Carolina was 3 of 12 on third down. So, and their average distance to go was 8.5 yards. So, like that
Mhm.
shows me that it's a team that, or it's a defense that's not giving up a lot of big plays on first and second down. And they're putting their opponent in the backfield and making them have to convert on third and long, which is extremely important for LSU's long term success this year defensively.
Yes, and you have to be pleased about them. I mean, as far as like being aggressive and forcing turnovers, this was a team that did not force many turnovers at all last year. And you're seeing an interception from Zay Alexander. You're seeing Brandon Swinson with a forced fumble. You're seeing Sage Ryan getting there with a forced fumble, and seeing Major Burns and Harold Perkins all recovering them. And Brian Kelly, I asked Brian Kelly about just the defense and the pass rush. Now he's been pleased with that, and he said that look, I mean, we're not there yet, but we're on our way to being there, and you can see the progress that this defense has made, especially from last year.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like I think this is a more aggressive unit. This is one that, as Blake Baker said, is going to wreak havoc it really just does come down to me to the explosive plays. And I
Yeah.
think for as many plays as LSU was able to run fit and stuff, um, those ones where the teams break up for 40, 50, 60 yards, those things hurt even that much more when you feel like you are doing a good job, but then still give up the big play there that keeps a team in a game. Like, I really want to see over the next couple weeks LSU just come out, punch a team in the mouth, not let up, and kind of coast to a couple of wins here. That would show me that it's a team that's kind of learning from its mistakes, and is not going to be in all of these tight one possession games, because you can only flirt with disaster for so many
Mhm.
games in a row. Like, I mean, I can't remember what stat it is, but like, or what the saying is exactly, but if you kind of play with your food a little bit too much, it's going to come back and it's going to bite you. And I think
Yeah.
LSU learned that the hard way in the USC game. They were
Mhm.
able to overcome it in the South Carolina game, but you don't want to be in those positions week in and week out. It just
Mhm.
puts a lot of extra stress on you. It puts a lot of extra stress on your team and your kind of mentality of every game. So would love to see LSU come out here and really dominate a UCLA team from start to finish if they can.
Right, and we're about to talk about pretty briefly about UCLA because I know Glenn needs to go and pretty soon and go to LSU player interviews and everything. So my next thing, Glenn, is Harold Perkins, right?
Yeah,
Because Harold, that's always been a topic when we talk about Harold Perkins. Of course, we have to mention him. But I feel like even though I'm looking at the stat lines when I'm writing my game recap and everything, looking at the stat lines for LSU, that there are other games that Perkins may have had more tackles and a better stat line, but I thought the South Carolina game, you can feel his impact a little bit more as far as being a pass rusher, freeing up somebody else. And Brian Kelly said that he's at a place where he can get other players to get better and elevate their play. And I think you saw a little bit of that in the South Carolina game.
yeah. Look, I like this new position that LSU has him in. It's not a traditional like inside will linebacker where he's going to have to shed a whole ton of blocks and kind of be able to help fit the run in that respect. They're gonna have him on the outside a little bit. They're gonna have him drop in coverage. They're gonna have him. It's kind of a similar role, not exactly the same, but it's a similar role to what he was doing last year
Mhm.
in terms of like what they're asking him to do from on a play by play basis. But look, I think he was able to get some pressures in this game.
Mhm.
Was able to, maybe not always make the play, but he was around the play. And I think
Yeah.
that's just really important here when especially if you're an opposing offense and you see that guy coming at you, even if he's not the one making the play, if he's setting other guys up to make the plays behind him, I still think you get the same result, and you get Braden Swinson example for getting
Mhm.
3 tackles or 3 sacks. You get Sage Ryan coming off the edge and stripping. I believe it was Sellers, maybe it was Ashford. Do you remember when Sage got the
Yeah.
sack there?
Yeah.
Was it Sellers? It might have been Ashford. I can't remember exactly.
I think that was Ashford.
Okay. All right. That might have been the second half against Ashford. Yeah. But I mean, Perkins was right there to recover the ball. He was right in Ashford's face before Sage Ryan got there. So look, I think that he's a guy that, look, I think everybody had so many high expectations for him, especially after that first year of him being this double digit sack guy, this 25 plus tackle for loss kind of eater, backfield, wrecker. That look, I think you have to adjust to what we've seen the last couple of years from him. He's got that in him. It's just not going to be as frequently, I think, as maybe he's shown in that freshman season, where he just really got off to an electric start. It was see ball, hit ball mentality. I think he's trying to learn a lot of different aspects of the game. I think he's grown in other aspects of his game as well. Like, I think he's a legitimate drop and coverage kind of guy that can hold his
Mhm.
own against a slot receiver or against a tight end, or if you're asking him, out of the backfield to go, hit a running back, I think he can go make that play. I know he didn't against South Carolina. He missed it, and that was the first really big chunk play that South Carolina was able to get on LSU. But he was right there, and he had a chance to make that play, a TFL on the very first play of the game. So, look, I think he'll get better as the season goes along, as they kind of get more comfortable in that role. I think it just stinks from LSU's perspective, spend a whole nother offseason on one position and then kind of have to scrap it, first
Mhm.
3 or 4 games into the year, and transitioning him into another kind of role mid-season. I think it's just unfortunate.
Yeah, I actually got a chance to look back. It was actually Sellers.
It
So
was Sellers?
it
Okay.
was,
Yeah.
it was Sellers.
So that's a big play. I mean,
Yeah.
against a guy that was really cooking LSU to get him for a strip sack there and make a big play on him was important.
Yeah, and that definitely played that injury to Sellers definitely played a role in LSU coming back because he was definitely hurting LSU as a runner. But LSU's defense had a pretty good second half. I mean, only 1 yard given up in the third quarter was a
Yeah.
amazing stat there. But yeah, let's talk about UCLA moving forward, Glenn. Now this was the home and home, of course, a couple years ago. LSU goes and plays in the Rose Bowl. I'm sure LSU fans definitely want to forget about that one and not talk about that one too much around here. But now UCLA having a rough start to the season, got destroyed by Indiana, won a close one in the which wasn't pretty in the first game of the season as well. So an opportunity for LSU to get back to home and then have a chance to you got a pretty good stretch. We got UCLA, which hasn't been good. You have South Alabama. You have a bye. You can rest up, and you can take your best swing at Ole Miss.
Yeah, look, I think this UCLA game, I've said it a couple times here before we've gotten into the preview of it, but I think this is an opportunity for LSU to go out there and put his foot down on an opponent, get off to a good start, and just kind of, I wouldn't say coast, but continue to keep the pressure on and go win comfortably. Go win a comfortable game because even the Nicholls State game a couple weeks ago, where
Yeah.
everybody thought this was going to be an easy game for LSU to go out there and dominate from start to finish. It was a 2-point game at the very start of the third quarter because of that Guggenheim run, and
Mhm.
they had to leave their starters out there eh, almost to the very end of the game. I mean, I
Mhm.
think Nussmeier was out there late in the fourth quarter,
No
so
way.
they've got to go out there and show that they can dominate a team from start to finish. In my opinion, you don't have to do that every week, but you have to show that that's in you, and you can go out there and put together a game plan for 4 quarters. That to me would show this team has taken that next step because UCLA has just been. I mean, I don't want to say they've been anemic
Yeah,
offensively.
right,
Like
right.
they are an offense that is struggling to get anything
Mhm.
going. And I think there's going to be some playmaking opportunities for this defense to get them off the field, get LSU's offense in some advantageous positions. Maybe Xavion makes a big special teams play in this game kind
Mhm.
of deal. But I mean, UCLA has averaged 14 and a half points a game in its first 2 games. They haven't sniffed 20 points yet in a game. And I mean, they played Hawaii week 1
Yeah.
or maybe week 0. I think it was maybe week 0. And then they had
Yeah.
a week in between there where they had some extra time to rest up, and then they got absolutely obliterated, like you said, by an Indiana team that's good. I mean, I think Indiana's maybe usurped expectations so far this year, but it's still a team that I think when you're comparing to LSU should not be much of a comparison there. So, look, this is an opportunity for LSU to make a bunch of plays happen. Get a lot of guys involved, maybe get some guys healthy and back on the field and kind of revved up for, like you mentioned, in a couple weeks when you're going to need a lot of these big bullets against in Ole Miss. I'd love to see if Deshaun Womack can give it a go after missing a game at South Carolina. I'd love to see Chris Hilton get integrated back into this offense a little bit. So there's a lot of different things I think you can learn from this game from an LSU perspective, and I'm looking forward to it. I think it should be a good environment, and you know UCLA with the quote unquote sissy blue
Yeah,
shirts. It'd be
no,
good to get. It'd be good to get a little bit of a payback there after
yeah.
what the Bruins did to LSU a couple of years ago to start the season. So
Right. It should be interesting, and you're not going to get this matchup
yeah,
often at all. You're not
yeah.
going to see UCLA come and play in Tiger Stadium. So
Yeah,
I
and I
think it's
think from a jersey perspective, it actually has the potential to be a really elite level jersey game. Like
mhm.
you get like a powder blue jersey
Right.
from UCLA, kind of similar to what Ole Miss has. That would be a really interesting kind of combo. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm excited to just kind of get to the game and see if LSU can't, like I said, play some complimentary football and get off to a really nice start here on this 2-game home stretch.
Absolutely, Glenn. I appreciate you coming on the Chase with Jace and talking some LSU football. And make sure to follow Glenn. He does an excellent job with 247. Make sure you give him a follow and make sure to set your notifications as well to keep up with all his stuff and all his posts at Glen West 21. Glen, what's going on with a 247? And I know y'all have a lot of LSU content coming up this week.
Yeah, lots of content. We're on top of recruiting over at 24/7, and that's a big part of what we want to do over there. So we'll have official visitors updated throughout the week. We've got some basketball recruiting nuggets up already. We've got a lot of game coverage and focusing on a couple of players that we talked about. Garrett Nussmeyer, Aaron Anderson, a couple of the big storylines from this last week. So yeah, just come check us out, come hang out with us on our message boards. But I appreciate you giving us the opportunity here, Jace. It's been fun.
Absolutely, Glenn. You're more than welcome to come on at any time, talk about LSU, and I'm sure we'll catch up once again, one more probably at least one more time before the end of the season to discuss what's going on with the Tigers.
Yep, sounds good, man. Thanks.
I appreciate it, Glenn. Glenn West from 247. Jace Lejeune from Gridiron Football. Make sure to check out all of our content for gridironfootballusa.com, and we'll see you next time on another great episode of The Chase with Jace.